A lot of people, including me, have made comparisons between Donald Trump and Kingpin, as well as between Fisk's Punisher worshipping task force and MAGA voters who like to slap Punisher stickers on, well, just about everything. But does that similarity actually exist? Welcome to Philosophy All Along. I'm a professional philosopher, and I like to use the tools of philosophy to help me understand the things I love, like Daredevil Born Again, on a deeper level. Okay, so what's the best evidence against this idea that Fisk and Trump are supposed to be compared in some sort of intentional and purposeful way? Well, the fact that the show finished filming back in April 2024. So if you're looking around at the world right now and going, wow, the world is on fire and the way things are going straight to hell is just like the way that it was happening in Daredevil Born Again. Well, those things in theory can't actually be connected because, well, they finished back then. Now, true, Trump was campaigning and Trump was a big deal and he was certainly influential, but if we're seeing direct correlations between current events and things that are happening right now and things that are happening in the show, they can't be connected. But yet, when you're watching the final episode of Daredevil Born Again and you see Daredevil walk into Josie's bar and he's calling us to resist, that really reverberates with the language of resistance to Trump, the actual words that are used by the resistance. So what's going on here? Now, I do think that to some degree, they might just simply be hitting on notes that we're familiar with, right? That TV shows and films and narratives in general take things that happen not just in current events, but things that were really influential in the past, and they use them to help kind of reverberate with us emotionally. So the fact that Trump was president, 4 years ago also, and we had a lot of the same feelings and experiences, even for people who are MAGA voters, it reverberates with them to have similar tensions and similar issues come up. So one thing that we can also think about is the simple fact that whilst this all seems new, in a lot of ways it isn't in terms of what had happened with Trump. We saw a lot of similar stuff back when he was president the first time. So is there anything actually to this? Well, there are some very scary similarities, right? No matter kind of who you're voting for and what side you're on, let's just be super honest about it. Fisk does require loyalty from his people. And we know that Trump requires the same thing. So that the fact that Fisk kind of sits down and says, okay, who's actually loyal to me? Those are the people that I'm going to keep. I'm going to get rid of the rest. That is definitely something we've seen Donald Trump do. Now, you might be a MAGA person. You're like, that's great. They should do it. But nevertheless, it is a similarity, right? And the idea of using fear, that there's something that people should be afraid of, and that he's the person who can save us from it, well, that's also very Trumpian. The fact that Fisk is like, you need to be afraid of these vigilantes, and then you need to be afraid of the dark, and you need to be afraid of crime, and it's only my task force that's be able to stop all of this. This certainly is reminiscent of Trump. And I do not think that even if you are a Trump supporter, you can really disagree with that, right? He's calling out like immigrants and saying that people are violent, and it's Antifa and it's people from Latin America, right? There's all these people, including liberals, that he's telling us we need to be terrified of. In fact, that's a really nice connection, right? Between the idea of liberals and vigilantes being somehow connected, right? Trump uses a comparison that the liberal people, the people who think that they're trying to free us and that they're trying to kind of go and give us greater rights and greater freedoms, that they're actually the people who are the most dangerous. And that sounds a lot like Kingpin and vigilantes. Oh, these people who want to help you, they really want to hurt you. They're actually the most dangerous. The idea of imprisoning and silencing those who dissent or disagree with you is again something that we see with Fisk and Trump. So Fisk's got all of his detractors there in prison by the end of the season. And we literally see Trump deporting people who disagree with him to other countries, or literally having them sent to prisons in El Salvador without any trial. And again, you might be like, that's great, and I love that. Okay, well, I love that for you. I personally am not a fan of that idea, but the fact of the matter is that's a similarity. Let's lock people up without trial. So we're seeing that has happened both in our reality and in the television show. I think one of the most important comparisons between the two is just the fact that Fisk keeps talking like we got through this together, we're going through this together, like I understand you, I'm a man of the people. Trump certainly says the same thing, and yet you're talking about a man who lives a radically different life than the rest of us. And you have to know this. Again, no matter what side you're on, you have to know that he lives a radically different life because he's bragged about having a gold toilet. Do you have a gold toilet? I certainly don't. The man has his name emblazoned on buildings, right? He's owned his own casinos. He's had his own university, right? He's had his own brand of steaks, for crying out loud. He lives a radically different life from the rest of us. So whenever he's saying that he gets it or that he's like us or that he understands the American people, he has to be lying because he's a billionaire. I remember when he said that we all need voter IDs because, well, even when you go grocery shopping, you need an ID. And I was like, wait, who needs an ID when they go grocery? And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. He's never been grocery shopping. So he doesn't know what he's talking about. So, okay. So these are two populist politicians, people who say, listen, I'm like you, I get you, but they're really not, right? They really actually don't get it. And whilst the rest of us are like, running around after each other and our lives are on fire and our cities are on fire, they're just kind of happily having a nice little dinner in front of their bloodied painting, clinking their glasses, reflecting on what a great job that they're doing, while the rest of us are like losing our jobs and desperate and wondering, screaming about what's happening in the world. One of my favorite similarities, though, is between the question of the task force, right, who worship the Punisher. They're like, he's the man. They've got, Punisher logos on their bullets, and they've got him on their vests. And this is super similar to a lot of Trump voters, right? They put the Punisher logo on their trucks, and they put Punisher logos on their guns. And that's just, you might be a liberal Punisher lover who also does something similar. So it's not just them, but it does seem to be a whole lot of using the Punisher logo and also being someone who is a Trump supporter. And also we see it a lot with police officers and military personnel who are using this logo to say, I'm like the Punisher. Now, it's really important to note that in the comics, the Punisher calls that out, and he literally says, if you don't stop, he's talking to a couple of police officers, if you don't stop using my logo and pretending like you're like me, I'm going to come after you next. But in this show, in Daredevil Born Again, he kind of goes a different route. He calls them clowns. He tells them that what they're basically doing is a circus. But what I really love about it is that he points out the fact that they don't actually understand what he's going through. And I think that that's super important. I love that idea. I love the fact that Frank is calling out all of the people out there who've got his Punisher logo slapped on their whatevers and acting as if the violence they want to do as police officers or military personnel or just as voters in general, that the violence that they want to do against others is similar to the violence that he wants to do. And he points it out. You're not like me, right? You haven't gone through the experience that I have. He really is just pointing out you're being just a bunch of whiny babies about it, right? You're like children playing dress up. You're acting like you actually understand suffering. And yeah, maybe you got through some stuff, but you didn't see your family gunned down in front of you and then took a bullet to your own head. And because of that, you literally relive that experience every day. Are there people who have had really bad experiences? I can't speak about people who have PTSD, who have served, who have really been through it. But let's be honest, the vast majority of people who are acting like they have a right to the Punisher logo as a justification for the violence that they wish they could do, mostly feelings of politics, like, oh, those stupid liberals, if only we could, I would love, to beat them up. Let me put my Punisher logo on something. Frank is pointing out that's ridiculous. You haven't been through it. You really haven't. You haven't been through what he has. I haven't been through what he has. And so I do love the fact that it's the Punisher calling people out, not for the same reason you would think, that it has something to do with a problem with violence. He has no problem with the violence. He has a problem with the fact that we are acting like we get it when we don't. In other words, that we don't have a right to it. We don't have a right to a claim to his pain. And that seems perfectly justified. So given when it was filmed and when it was written before the Trumpian dystopia that we live in now, it probably wasn't a comment on current affairs. But I do think that the writers were keenly aware of where things could go. Like they were kind of looking into the future a little bit, and they were wondering what would it be like. And they used Trump as kind of a template, right? Kind of imagined where he would want to go, the things that he's saying. At the time he was saying, I'm going to be your vengeance, I'm going to be your retribution. He was talking about filling, his cabinet and all of these positions with loyalists. And they said, okay, we're going to kind of use this as a template. That would be my guess. But most importantly, I think the deepest meaning here really is that it's a warning, right? It's a reminder to us not to accept things as if this is the way that things should be. It's okay to recognize that that things are wrong right now, and that we should be standing up for people who are weaker than us. In other words, I think Daredevil is a metaphor for voting, right? He's gathering an army. And a good way to understand that is okay, let's get everyone together and let's vote. And let's have a voice. Let's do something about this. We can't just sit here in silence, even though we feel like it's hopeless. And Punisher, well, he is a metaphor, I think, not for going out and doing actual violence. We don't want that. And in fact, that's really just used by the Trumpian terrorists as evidence that their terrorism against the country and the world and our democracy is justified. Anytime a Democrat or a liberal person engages in some sort of violence, it just becomes an excuse from the right to say, look how crazy they really are. So I don't think the Punisher is a metaphor for doing violence. I think he's a metaphor for protest, something that can be a little bit more dangerous. It can be a little bit more isolated. It can be a bit scarier. You're really kind of putting yourself out there. And so the Punisher is calling us to speak up, even if we are afraid of being seen with our signs and our posters. And Daredevil's saying, listen, get your butt out there and vote. And Punisher saying, well, get your ass out there and hold up a sign and stand up for people in peaceful ways. Well, I don't know if Frank would actually say that, but I'm certainly saying that. So that the people who cannot defend themselves, the people who really are being harmed, that they have a voice. Always, our superheroes are the opportunity to remind us that there are those who do need us to speak up for them. So there is an opportunity now that if you see a similarity between Fisk and Trump, you have an opportunity to be a hero yourself in the ways that you think are safe and right and legal, to do the right thing, to speak up for those who need us.